Good morning, students. Back to the lectures on Indian cinema. We have now reached the golden age of Indian cinema, which happened in 1950s and went on till say around 1970s. So this is the age which have contributed the most soulful songs in Hindi cinema. Why is it termed as golden age of Indian cinema? Not because of all those songs alone. We have discussed many factors when we discussed partition. We have discussed many factors why there was this influx of talents into Bombay film industry. And that actually contributed to this age and made this age the golden age. So I should say that this is the age where the talent was in its zenith, at its peak. So this is starting from late 40s to the end of 50s. So this is the first phase of golden age. It was Nehruvian period. And the film industry actually celebrated the independence of India with a spate of films about freedom fighters and nationalist martyrs. But we should say that nothing could dispel the gloom of the partition of the country into two nations, India and Pakistan, and the horrific violence which came after that between the Muslims and Sikhs on one hand and the Hindus and Muslims on the other. And we have discussed it earlier too that partition had a very direct impact on the Hindi film industry. Lahore, a major city and film producing center in the northwest of undivided India, became now part of West Pakistan. And as a result, hundreds of Hindu directors, producers, actors, musicians, lyricists, singers, and technicians made their way to Bombay film industry, enriching it with their immense talent. And when you take Eastern India, Bengali cinema, headquartered in Calcutta, was badly hit by partition when it lost its half of its Bengali audience to Bangladesh. So there they had to export to the new country and then re-import subjects to all, which was subject to all kinds of taxes. So as studios in Calcutta began to fold, began to decline, there was this exodus, migration of talent to Bombay. So this arrival of all these talented filmmakers to Bombay from different studios of India gave new vigor and confidence to the bustling Hindi film industry. And that actually led many film historians to label 1950s as the golden age of Hindi cinema. So, along with that, there was this air of optimism which was brought by Indian independence. So they all were looking for a new beginning, and that actually brought an air of optimism. They believed that everything is going to be beautiful, and that actually reflected in the films too. Along with that, there were other factors too. It was the influence of world cinema through International Film Festival of India, which had its first exhibition in 1952. So, this International Film Festival of India, which was held in Bombay in 1952, exposed Hindi filmmakers to a world of cinema outside Hollywood. Till that point, we had only opportunity to see the films from Hollywood. So this was the first time we got exposed to the films or to the world cinema. So there were all these neo-realist films coming from Italy, which actually left a great impact as the socio-economic context represented in them appeared very similar to the Indian one. Social realism became a much celebrated and idealized, and films that followed the conventions of popular cinema became more realistic from this point onwards. And it is said that great directors like Satyajit Ray was influenced by the exhibition, this international film festival, and he was particularly influenced by this Italian neo-realist cinema, Bicycle Thieves. So these were the factors which contributed to this age, and along with that, it was IPTA which provided a cultural background. So, what is IPTA? IPTA is actually Indian People's Theatre Association. So, IPTA was actually founded in 1943 in Bombay by a group of progressive writers, musicians, actors, artists, and activists. And it was majorly, as the title itself signifies, it was majorly a theatre movement. But many prominent actors, composers, directors, lyricists, writers from the Bombay film industry had been involved in this movement prior to their work in cinema. For example, people like Bimal Roy. So, from this involvement came a concern and tendency to depict the lives and troubles of the downtrodden, marginalized sections of the society, to point out the exploitative nature of capitalism and romanticize and valorize the poor. So, this was the next factor. So, the first one was the influence of International Film Festival. Second, the influence of IPTA. And the third one we have discussed. In the last classes, we discussed the decline of the three major studios. It was Prabhat, New Theatres, and Bombay Talkies, and the introduction of all those independent producers into the film stage. That was the next factor. We have discussed that. And then came the star system. So this age is noted for its star system. We have great stars. We remember this age. We identify this age with these names: Devanand, Raj Kapoor, Dilip Kumar. And the first two, Devanand and Raj Kapoor, had started a production company. Devanand had this Navkedan Films, and Raj Kapoor, it was the RK Films. Navkedan Films was owned by this Devanand and his elder brother Chetan Anand, who is remembered for his movie Neecha Nagar, which was which is said to be shown in Cannes Film Festival, which took our fame abroad. So this production company was owned by Dev Anand and Chetan Anand, and it has produced numerous films. So numerous super hit films like Guide, based on R.K. Narayan's story, Jewel Thief, Joni Mera Naam, etc. And we have RK Films, it is Raj Kapoor Films. It was formed in 1948, and the first movie was Aag, which couldn't perform well in the box office, but later it made the super hit films of the age. The age is actually remembered for these set of films produced from this production company of Raj Kapoor. Most of the RK film productions share a common theme of criticizing the society and depicting love across social divides. The first film was a failure, as I said earlier, and then they had the first success, Barsat. And here we see the all time favorite combination, Raj Kapoor and Nargis, featuring in almost all films. So, why is it perceived as golden age? Because this is a time of abundance of creativity, originality, talent, quality, genius, sincerity, and professionalism. We see the rare combinations of all these things. Along with that, we see the talented actors, producers, directors, and even technicians. It was of the perfect blend of all these things. So it is termed to be, when you talk about Indian cinema, this is the age which you term as the good old days, which contain everything thought to be lacking in the present. While contemporary filmmakers pay lip service to Falke and the long history of cinema in India in terms of influences, legends, and nostalgia, films and filmmakers from the 1950s and 60s are the cinematic heritage of the contemporary Bombay film industry. But in reality, these films during 1950s thrived against a hostile environment. The post-independence era was not at all suitable for filmmaking because during this era, all these ruling elite considered films as inferior and had a corrupting force and believed that it had a corrupting influence on the society. So, high tax was levied on films, and films were lowest film production and lowest in priority, and even there was this moratorium on this non-essential building. And they were not, entertainment was not viewed as a necessity in a country which was at the time of independence 18% literate and had an average life expectancy of 26 years and was suffering from a food crisis and had over 1 million refugees to resettle. So, rapid industrialization, infrastructural development, and food self sufficiency were the main priorities, and film production became lowest in priority. And they had this lack of new theaters. Along with that, the censorship became severe during this period, especially moral censorship. It is very interesting to note that because it is after independence, it should have been more relaxed. But it was during this period censorship became stricter than pre-independence period. So the censors indulged their reformist tendencies in the process of certifying films. They expressed their disapproval about most films and ordered indiscriminate cuts in sequences. And it is said that at one point of time, even film songs were banned in All India Radio because it was treated as inferior art productions compared to all those classical arts. So there was a sudden disappearance of film songs from radio and an abundance of classical programs. It was a state patronage on classical art. And later they understood that, All India Radio understood that they lost most of its audience due to this decision. So the major characteristics of Golden Age, as I said earlier, it is the star system. Here we see the emergence of stars. As I said earlier, during 1920s and 30s, when we have discussed 1920s and 30s, I have discussed this point. All those films during that period is remembered with the names of the directors. It is V. Shantaram's film, like that. But from this point, we remember the names with, we associate films with the stars. So, from this period onwards, actors and actresses started commanding high fees and exerting their right to act in films of their choice. They started choosing their films. They had the option to be selective or to accept anything that came their way. They became publicity conscious, and the public relations industry flourished as it projected glamorous and romantic images of the stars. It is during this period we see all these film magazines, film pages with reviews as well as interviews, scandals, gossip columns, which became familiar part of film scene. Here we see the rise of legendary directors like Gurudutt, Bimal Roy, and Mehboob Khan. So Gurudutt was a director. It should we should say that he was ahead of his times. He is one of the greatest icons of commercial Indian cinema. Although he made less than 50 films, they are believed to be the best to come from Bollywood's golden age. It is known both for their ability to reach out to the common man and for their artistic and lyrical content. And it is said that they went on to become trend setters that have influenced Bollywood ever since. But for all his genius, there was a shroud of tragedy that overshadows his career and life. He had his first film with Devanand when he associated himself with Navkedan films. It was Basi, and it was during the this film he met his wife Geeta Dutt. Geeta Dutt has the most beautiful voice. The songs in Guru Dutt's films are all sung by Geeta Dutt. So the film was a failure, and later came his hit films. These are his hit films. One was Pyasa, and the other one was Kagas Ke Phool, which both were regarded as his best work. Pyasa was his masterpiece about a poet trying to achieve success in a hypocritical, uncaring world. It was a box office hit and is ranked as his greatest film ever. And his next film, Kagas Ke Phool, was a miserable flop at the box office. It is also a semi autobiographical story of a tragic love affair, which is again set in the backdrop of the film industry. It was a flop during that period, but after some years, later years, the film received critical acclaim for its cinematography and has gained a cult following due to the disaster Kagas Ke Phool. It is said that he stopped directing after that. So, here I am concluding my lecture. So, thank you, girls. Have a nice day.